Hi, and welcome to the Engineered Mind podcast, a podcast about engineering, AI, neuroscience, and other interesting topics of life to educate and inspire people all around the world. I'm your host, Yusuf, and for this episode of the podcast, I welcome Hasan Kubba. Author, entrepreneur, and startup strategist, Hasan is a specialist in technology startups, marketing, and fundraising. With his own London-based digital marketing business and startup investment experience, Hasan is particularly strong at breaking down complex business concepts into simple and effective strategies and tactics. His recent TEDx talk, titled Startups, Entrepreneurship and Unfair Advantages, was voted highest ever on the official TED subreddit. He is passionate about the future of entrepreneurship and digital disruption globally and is an in-demand startup mentor to early-stage entrepreneurs, workshop trainer, and international speaker. In this podcast, we speak about the book he wrote with his partner Ash Ali called The Unfair Advantage, which examines the role of unfair advantages in our unequal world, unpicks the nature of success, and shows how to increase your own chances of achieving it. Brimming with case studies from Snapchat to Google, Oprah Winfrey to Richard Branson, The Unfair Advantage helps you to look at yourself and your circumstances to find the ingredients you didn't realize you already had to succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my conversation with Hasan Kubba. Okay, Hasan, welcome to my podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on my show.
Thank you for having me.
So what I want to start with is, of course, if people buy your book, they can read about you and Ash. And talking about Ash, he's your friend and also another author of the book. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your cooperation, how you met each other. That would be quite interesting.
Yeah, sure. So I met Ash. It's interesting. So in the book, we talk about luck and serendipity and, just things happening. So I met Ash at a business dinner, which is funny because neither of us go to business dinners frequently or do something like that. I don't think I've been to any since that one. And neither does he. But we were there. And it was like an expensive one. It was a bit high end. I had just had I had reached the point of some success in my own business. So I had some free time. I had a bit of cash to invest. And I was like thinking, what should I do next? And so I was like, let me see this dinner. Maybe I'll meet some cool people. And we ended up sitting next to each other. It was a Middle Eastern restaurant in London. And we were both talking about, this place is overrated. This steak is just not that great. This lamb chops or something. And we just started to talk from there. And at the end of the dinner, he said, whereabouts do you live? Because I had driven there, but he had taken, I think, the London Underground or something. And I was like, yeah, I'm in Northwest London. He's like, oh, so am I. Maybe I can come with you. I was like, yeah, cool. Jump in my car. So we went together and we started chatting in the car. And he's like, oh, you're the first Iraqi guy I've met. I want to try some Iraqi food. I was like, yeah, sure. So then the next time I invited him to an Iraqi restaurant in London. And we just became friends from there. And he used to tell me, and apparently one of the things, this was like a big kind of insight that I had. He told me later, he was like, one of the reasons I liked you when I met you is you asked me, even though I knew he had just had an IPO, so he was like doing very well. He was like a multimillionaire kind of guy. I asked him, apparently, and I don't remember this, I asked him, how can I help you? So I think that was a big kind of lesson. It's like, okay, that's good. So I did like that kind of stuff that I've been learning and the way my parents have brought me up, that's paid off. So I made a good impression. Most people will try to get something from him, and I was offered to give him something. So he was at the stage of a lot of startups were pitching him for investment, for startup investing. And he's like, why don't you come to my office? So I went to his office. It was just a 5 to 10 minute drive. And because I had that free time, because I had that availability, I went with him and I started to give some really good analysis. So I became like his investment partner when it came to choosing which startup to invest in. And I joined him as a partner on that. So it built from there. And that's kind of what led to the book ultimately. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we became friends. We traveled I was in Southeast Asia at one point and he had a startup in Dubai and I told him, come out to meet me. And we met in Malaysia and he hadn't been to that part of the world. He loved it. But yeah, it was a friendship first of all. And then we kind of started working closer together as partners.
Mm-hmm. So for people who might just get started in this kind of fancy term about business and so on, could you maybe briefly describe what is the difference between an angel investor and venture capitalist? Maybe that's important to know for the audience.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so an angel investor is just an individual investor. That's simply all it means. Is usually a rich guy. Usually they have had some kind of IPO in a startup or in any other reason they have money, inheritance or whatever. And they want to invest in startups, which are risky, but they're, here in Europe, you get some tax benefits from doing it. If you had experience being an entrepreneur, you can give some advice and kind of guide it, and maybe you can choose the right startups and right founders to invest in. And a venture capitalist is usually it's an institutional investor. So it's usually they have an organization, that's their job, full-time, and it's larger sums of money that they invest. And they're managing a fund on behalf of other people who've invested in that venture capital fund. So that's what a VC is, really. And they invest later on. So usually the early stages are from angel investors of a startup. As your startup grows, maybe the next round will include venture capitalists.
Makes sense. I wanted to ask, how did you come up with the idea of writing the book? I have the impression it's more of like, because also considering your backgrounds, is more like giving back to those who are not that privileged. Also because of the title of the book. Can you explain it?
Exactly. It's I feel like, and this is even more true for Ash. Ash grew up really poor, from a poor background, very simple, very working class. His dad worked at a factory. They didn't grow up wealthy at all. He didn't go to university. So he kind of is not the typical person that you'd expect to be successful in life. He didn't really do very well at school or college, and he didn't go to university at all. So this was the case for Ash, and for me as well, because my background is as an immigrant. I was born in Baghdad, and I came to the UK, and I was eligible for free school meals and stuff like that because, again, we weren't doing that well. But I kind of did go to university, and I did go that more educational kind of route. But usually the path after doing economics, which is what I did, is to work in finance in the city of London, which I just did not appeal to me. I was like, okay, working all those hours, earning a lot of money, but what's the point? You don't have the time to spend that money. So yeah, I think for me, the main thing, and for me and Ash, the main thing was to reach people who didn't believe that they could achieve something like this. So I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur with my own business, making passive income, being able to travel and having loads of free time, while all my friends were like hustling in proper full-time jobs, wearing suits and ties, and being miserable in the morning commute in the London Underground in the morning. So it was a message to myself as somebody younger who had never seen these opportunities, and it was similar for Ash. So it was the case of thinking. It was also a backlash. So another aspect of it is it was a little bit of a backlash to the self-improvement type of stuff we might read. I'm a fan of self-improvement, but they do sometimes say anybody could do anything. If you just believe it, you can achieve it. And it's like, is that really true? It's not. I mean, it's a motivational thing to say. And I talk in the book about how you can have a different mental models. And sometimes you can use that kind of thinking of anybody could do it, let me do it. If they could do it, I could do it, why not? So that's a useful mindset, but it's not accurate mindset, and also it can be harmful if you're always comparing yourself to others and saying, oh my God, I'm just not good enough. Why are they doing it and I'm not? So then if you can think about, so that's like the pure hard work, hustle thinking. Like if you think success is purely about hard work and hustle and belief, then you're going to be disappointed if you don't become the next Mark Zuckerberg or Warren Buffett or whatever, right? Whereas if you believe that luck is involved, which it is, and if you speak to anybody successful who has even a dot of even a tiny part of self-awareness, they'll realize that luck is involved. There's serendipity, there's so much luck involved in this concept. Throwing in that luck idea into a business and self-development book was a great angle that we wanted to do. We didn't see many books out there like that. We wanted to talk about how you could be lucky to be talented at a particular thing, or you could be lucky to grow up in a certain place or speaking fluently, whether it's English or the native language of a developed country like German. Lots of different factors make you so lucky. Having a stable childhood, having, and also, so these are the positives, but also the other side, which is that things which seem like disadvantages can be advantages, the double-edged sword. So for example, having little money, which is what I grew up with and Ash did even more so, makes you more creative, can give you more of a fire in your belly to succeed. So it was a book of how do we get that all together into a model, into a framework, and actually make it practical and empowering for people to use. So that's what the Unfair Advantage became. And I hope, you found that when you were reading it as well, Yusuf.
Yeah, so we'll get back to the Miles framework in a few moments. There are some quotes I want to come back. For instance, there's one quote saying, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." What do you think about that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, so we in the chapter about luck, we talk about luck and how to get more lucky. There's actually a professor. He's an English professor, actually, of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, this guy is also, just as a side note, he's also a big YouTuber as well. He's a professor of psychology, but he does these magic tricks and these cool tricks on YouTube. His views are like, you're going to be shocked when you see his views. I can't remember his channel's name, but his name is Professor Richard Wiseman.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book called Luck, or something about luck. I can't remember the exact title. And he spoke about how I think he's carried them out himself, or he just spoke about these experiments about how your mindset can affect your luck. So if you're looking for opportunity, your brain is sort of filtering the world through opportunity. You get more lucky because you spot more opportunities. And also, just taking more action, which is what you spoke about, working harder makes you, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Harder work means you're putting yourself out there more, especially if you've got a little bit of working smart as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to put yourself out there more. So for example, if you were working on a podcast like you are now, like I am at the moment as well, doing more podcasts is going to make you more lucky in the sense that one of them might go viral. One of them might hit a chord. You'll get more lucky. So it's the idea of increasing your surface area to luck. So therefore you're more likely to be lucky. So one of the things, the way I describe it in the book is, if you throw more dice, you're more likely to roll a double six. You just throw the dice more. Nobody's counting your number of attempts. Just do it. And if you roll a 12 because you got a double six, everyone's going to say, wow, he got so lucky. Yeah, you were lucky, but also you tried more. Nobody's going to notice that. Mm-hmm. So working harder is a way to get more lucky. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes
What I want to say is that still doesn't, hard work is still not the full story though. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to address in this book. It's not just about hustle and working super hard, even though right now I'm researching Elon Musk and it seems like that's what he does. But it's also his intelligence, man. He's so intelligent, right? Mm-hmm. He works smart and works hard. Mm-hmm. So it's about doing both.
Yeah, it's very good that you say that, because actually when hard work would get the job done, then people from the third world countries would be like super rich, right?
Or like cleaners and waiters and there's lots of jobs out there where they work so hard, and it's like they're not going to. So obviously nobody's actually saying if you work really hard but then that's what it seems like the advice is, right? Sometimes they're just like, just work hard and believe in yourself, you'll get there. It's helpful sometimes, but it's not enough. It's necessary but not sufficient.
Mm-hmm. I want to get back to a quite controversial quote, I would say, from Bill Gates, who said that if you're born poor, it's not your fault, but if you die poor, it's your fault. What do you say about that one?
I don't think Bill Gates. I think that's one of those fake quotes.
Do you think so?
Because research. Yeah. I think it's one of those, like, online. There's all these like fake. Attributions of fake quotes. I don't think Bill Gates said that. He never says stuff like that. I wrote an article for some newspapers which didn't work out because of the timing, but I researched. Bill Gates wrote a letter at the end of 2019 about the year in progress and stuff, and he was talking about how lucky he was. He grew up with a computer in the 50s or 60s? 60s, I think. And there were hardly any computers at that time, but he was lucky enough to grow up near one. He grew up quite wealthy, quite privileged. He went to a really good school where they had good equipment. He had access to this college which had the computer, so he was able to do that. So something very simple, just as a very simple example, the luck of being born at that time, in that place, with that kind of background and socioeconomic background, in other words, wealth of his family, to be able to have those opportunities. If he grew up in Africa or something, he wouldn't be where he was. So I don't think Bill Gates said that. These quotes, they can be empowering or like motivating, because it's about taking responsibility for your life, Mm-hmm. So like, I'm responsible for where my situation is in life right now. If I don't have a big number in my bank statement, that's my responsibility. Yes and no. I mean, the answer is it's quite complicated, because it's success. You're a smart technical guy, so I can discuss this in more depth with you, right? Success is an emergence. It's not a cause and effect. It's an emergent from multiple factors. So they say, to give another example of emergence, is an ant colony. They say in biology, like ant colony is actually the organism, not one ant. Them working together has a super intelligence, or kind of, I don't know if it's called the super intelligence, but it has an intelligence that comes about from something very simple. They have very simple, like algorithmic way of behaving, the ants themselves, but as a colony is super smart. And it's because that cleverness of the ant colony, or the cleverness or the consciousness of our own human minds, it's from an emergence of many things working together to create this new thing on a higher level. So success is similar. It's not do this and you'll be successful. It's not a simple formula. It's actually a complicated formula of timing, of certain kind of personality attributes, of certain maybe business partners that you get in with, maybe the kind of education that you had when you were younger, where you were born, where your parents took you to, how hard you work, how smart you work. These are huge, huge factors. But it's not, in other words, not everything is totally your control. So if I was to summarize it, is if you die poor, especially in a developed country, let's say, let's narrow it down a little bit, you have some responsibility for that, but not full. They've done studies about people who grow up in poverty, even in developed countries. Their IQ is actually lower. Some of these studies, we actually talk about this, I think, in the book as well. We talk about universal basic income. One of the studies that supports it is the fact that people are actually make dumber decisions in life when they have more scarcity in their life. When you have more abundance, you can make smarter decisions. Now, again, it's a double-edged sword a little bit, because if you have a little bit of scarcity, if you have too much abundance, you're just too lazy and you're not usually driven. You have some scarcity. It's good because it makes you creative, but you take it too far and you actually get more stupid. Your diet, your sleep, your stress, your health is all affected. So I think what we talk about is how unfair advantages stack up on top of each other, and they have like a positive feedback loop. Success begets more success. You get more successful from a little bit of success. That's the capitalist system, but it's also the natural system. The laws of nature are a little bit like that as well. Things are spread on a power law. I know I'm getting a little bit kind of technical and out there, but what I'm trying to say is that if you start off with a bit of luck when you were younger, that can have exponential increase throughout your life somewhat. And if you start off with a lack of luck, you have some trauma in your childhood, you grow up very poor with a lot of stress, and cortisol levels are high, and poor nutrition, you see that has compounding effects throughout your life. All this just to say that it's a balance. I don't believe in these self-improvement quotes and these harsh quotes of like, yeah, you have to be harsh on yourself. I don't think harshness on yourself is fully the right approach. You have to be a bit forgiving. To give one example, I always wanted to improve myself in so many areas when I was younger, and I would always fail of trying to do this new habit of like exercise every morning, wake up super early, do some meditation, plan my day, like all these like things which could improve my life. And it's like I would always fail to do it because I would always try to do too much. I would always beat myself up when I fail. And what I realized is doing one habit at a time, one small, like lower your goals, be more forgiving towards yourself, more compassionate towards yourself, you can make more progress. But again, you have different personalities, things work for different people. But that's the biggest advice I would give to myself when I was younger. So going back to it is, I think it's a huge balance. Yes, partly it's your control, to go back to your quote, but partly it's outside of your control. So you have to be kind of the luck. We talk about it early on in the book, I think chapter 2, or chapter 3 or something. We talk about how it's a balance between thinking that success is all to do with luck and success is all to do with hard work. To believe that you die poor, it's your fault, it's believing that it's all hard work. It's not true. It's not all hard work. There's a lot of luck as well. Believing it's all luck is bad as well, because then you do nothing and you think, oh, I'm just not lucky, and you can complain.
That's a good one. Getting back to that as well, like also the system gives us this impression, right? If you, especially you know it as well as myself, like if you have this conservative parents who want you to be an engineer, or you are a doctor, or you're a failure. And also the system, this whole society system of the meritocracy, Maybe you can go a little bit into detail about that one, what that suggests and what it does with us.
Yeah, I would say like it's meritocracy, or believing that we live in a pure meritocracy. We do live in somewhat of a meritocracy, of course. But to believe that we live in a pure meritocracy, in other words, it's 100% luck. In other words, if you die poor, it's completely your fault. It's just false. This black and white thinking is wrong. This is what I'm trying to say. You have to be able to believe in some kind of balance, or some kind of holding two opposing concepts at the same time. And even if they might seem paradoxical, realizing that, no, it's somewhere in between. It's like, you can get into philosophy with this and think, do we have free will? You can go even that far and say, do we even have free will to choose what we're doing? Do we have agency to choose our lives? And I think there's some truth to the fact that there are genetic factors that influence our life. There's a cool documentary on Netflix called Identical Brothers or something. It's really interesting. It's an award-winning documentary. It's like, I don't want to do any spoilers because it's got some cool twists. But essentially, I'm just going to give you the takeaway lessons scientifically. You see that identical twins, they have, even when they're brought up separately, they have very similar outcomes. And that's because of the strength of the genetic kind of predetermination. But at the same time, you do see differences due to the environment. So this is the nature versus nurture debate. This is the idea of free will versus determinism. The truth is somewhere in between. So if we take that in our lives and realize, if we look at success, and don't compare yourself to success in the way that you beat yourself up and you feel terrible and it can really affect your mental health. That's really bad. And at the same time, don't think that, oh, I can never do that. They just got lucky. I just don't get luck myself, etc. That's also bad. You have to realize that there's something that you can learn from successful people, some of the mindsets, the mentalities, the way they look for opportunities, the way they react to certain stress and failure. And at the same time, realize that we all have different like hardware capabilities. We can push it and improve, of course, but there's still some limits. But we have different things that we're good at, which are not measured by an IQ test or measured by school exams. There's emotional intelligence, which is very important. There's creativity. There's working with other people. And you don't need to be good at everything. This is the thing that is very liberating, is the idea that we have that show, The Apprentice. In the American version used to be with Trump, right? The UK version is with Alan Sugar. He's like a billionaire as well. And in this show, I don't know if there's one in Germany or if you guys see it, but in this show, they give this illusion that to be a successful businessman or entrepreneur, you have to be good at everything. You have to be super well-rounded, and it's not true. You do not have to be good at everything. You can have business partners, you can have advisors, you can have a team. So you can be really good at one thing and bad at others, as long as you partner up with people who are good at where you're bad, or where your unfair advantages are, is where your strengths are, and your disadvantages could be the unfair advantage of somebody else. And that's how you can partner up and set up a good company or work together well as a team or in a project.
But then wouldn't this also imply that there is no single person on earth who is self-made? Because there's always interdependency.
I would say so. Did you get a chance to see my TED Talk, by the way, Yusuf?
I've seen it.
Yeah. So this is what I touch on in this TED Talk. I was like, is there really such a thing as self-made? I mean, everything is to degrees. There's nothing that's pure. Nobody's purely self-made because your parents brought you up, your society has educated you, right? You have the roads which were built, this infrastructure that was built. Nobody does all of this ourselves, right? We are social human beings and we live in a society, no matter how much these individualists and libertarians, like some Americans are libertarians and they really believe in the individual. And some of the concepts there can be good because you take personal responsibility, just like the quote you gave me. But ultimately, and here in Europe, we're more aware of the idea that we live in a society and it's good to pay taxes. It's good to have a government which can deal with a global pandemic. It's good to have roads which are taken care of. It's good to have free healthcare. It's good to have education that's really good. It really, really helps. So nobody's self-made, no. But some people are more self-made than others. If somebody purely inherited their money, Trump says, I had a small loan of $1 million. Like, how self-made is that versus somebody like Elon Musk, who has been accused of growing up wealthy, which he did. but he grew up with an abusive father. He moved away when he was 17, and then they were really poor from then on, when he was like from teenage onwards, and he had so much abuse. And it's like, it's not the same, right? Or somebody who grew up really poor, like Ash Ali, my business partner, or Larry Ellison grew up really poor. There are a few examples from like really famous people as well. Like there are degrees, right?
Yeah, but that's so interesting that you mentioned, because there's also this guy who founded Twitter, who also had these relations. So it helped him a bit. This was his unfair advantage of being like growing up not that poor, not having an abusive father, but a supportive, some kind of framework around him. But then it comes to the point, maybe you know this anecdote, or I think it's based on a real story. It always depends on how you react to your surroundings or to your environment. There was one guy who was a murderer, and he was asked, why did you become a murderer? And then he said, because my parents or my father was an alcoholic, but his brother was a lawyer. Yeah. So it really depends on how you react to your circumstances, right? So it's so many parameters that come in, which brings us to the Miles framework, which kind of, I wouldn't say trivializes, but really focuses on the most important points, I would say. Maybe you can explain what the Miles framework is.
Yeah, so the idea behind it, or the idea behind the book in general, is that success is not based on purely hard work and hustle, although that plays a role. But actually, it's about leveraging, and the hard work specifically is about leveraging your unfair advantages. What do we mean by unfair advantages? We don't mean unethical or illegal advantages, and of course those do exist. But we're talking about anything where you have a head start compared to the competition. Anything where you're kind of, for some reason, you're just starting off in a better position. You know, life is not a level playing field. So the idea of unfair advantage, a very simple example from sports, is like a basketball player who's very tall. If you're tall, it's not like you worked harder to be tall. You're just taller. But that really helps you to do a slam dunk, or it really helps you play basketball, right? And also, it doesn't mean you can't become a professional basketball player if you're short. There have been some, but very fewer. It's so much harder. All things being equal, it's better to be taller. Similar thing applies to business. Similar things applies to life. If you're good looking in life, that can help you. It also has double-edged swords. There are double-edged swords to this, but it can help you to be good looking. It can help you to be tall, even in life. It can help you to grow up wealthy and very well educated. It can help you to grow up in a developed country that's affluent and, you know, with good resources. So these are unfair advantages, but also being naturally gifted at coding is an unfair advantage. Being naturally gifted at managing people and leading a team can be an unfair advantage. So all of these different areas, and we thought, how can we break down unfair advantages? So we broke them down into 5 categories, and we called it the Miles framework. So Miles is an acronym. M stands for money. So having money is usually better than not having money. You can invest in your startup. You can have a runway to be able to survive, to be able to pay the bills, to be able to work on a new project. Also, it can have a double-edged component, like I mentioned before, but all of these features can. I, for Miles, I stands for intelligence and insight. Intelligence is broken down into different types of intelligence. You can be book smart, like an IQ. You can be street smart with emotional and social intelligence and common sense. You can have creativity, you know, creative intelligence. So these are all factors of intelligence, which are all important. And there's also insight. Insight is having an idea, having a unique perspective. It's part of intelligence, kind of, but it's also kind of to do with your environment, to be able to see, or your status, to be able to see unique insights. And I'll come back to insight in a second. Location and luck is about being in the right place at the right time. Very important. This is where serendipity comes in. If you're in the right location, if you're in the right timing to start a company, if you're in the right location to start a company, plays a big role. I grew up in London. I was born in Baghdad, but it became an unfair advantage that I came to London when I was 3 years old. So I was able to kind of live with my parents in an affluent city, rent-free, when I finished university, to start a business. I was able to get clients in London and meet them face to face. You know, these are things that can really, really help.
But also sorry for interrupting, but also the subtle things, right? If you would have like grown up in Baghdad until you were like 17 and then moved to London, then maybe you would have this maybe an accent, which would make it harder to speak on the stage. And
massively, I'm so lucky. Like, I know people that came when they were older to the UK, having thick accents which are hard to understand, and just lower language skills in general. It's very much an unfair advantage when I open my mouth, or if I pick up the phone and I just sound like I'm just a native English speaker, right? Luck in terms of timing, but in terms of all other factors as well. But we kind of speak about it in terms of timing here. Education and expertise is about the education you've had, and expertise is what you've built up through your own experiences and through your own, self-learning. And status, which is huge. So S is for status. Status is how you come across. It's your personal brand. They say you judge a book by its cover, and we had a good publisher, so we have a nice cover and we're happy with it. But that happens in life, right? So we're all judged by our covers, unfortunately. So this is a sad reality about human nature, but we have to accept these kind of brutal truths about human nature and go with it. So whether fortunately or unfortunately, we're going to be judged by how we look, how we come across, how we sound, how we hold ourselves, what our LinkedIn pages look like, what our social media pages look like. That's status. So it can be the color of your skin, it can be your accent, it can be people can tell, especially here in the UK, you could tell somebody's class from their accent. You could tell they're working class, middle class, or upper class from their accent. You could tell if they're educated from how they speak. You can tell somebody from the color of their skin, There's all these factors, but it's also to do with your credibility. So having a degree, having already had an exit with the previous startup, etc. These are all part of your status. Yeah. What's important in status as well is your inner status. And that's something that we do have control over, which is how you feel about yourself, your self-esteem, your confidence. That affects your outer status because it's how you come across, how you hold yourself, how you speak. It's to do with confidence, right? So these are the miles factors, and these are big, big pillars of unfair advantages. Usually if you analyze yourself or analyze others, you're going to find pretty much everybody has unfair advantages. We all do. And they have double-edged swords, like I mentioned. So for example, you can grow up from, what example should I give? You can be a female entrepreneur. So being a woman entrepreneur, usually people are going to not expect that from you, first of all, for you to be a CEO of a startup and a big company, especially a tech startup, even more for the technical roles. You're going to be less expected, and people are not going to think you're very competent. Just from pattern recognition, right? People are going to see mostly it's nerdy guys that do technical stuff in software or whatever, even hardware. So that can be a disadvantage, right? But the double-edged sword is you have unique insights. So, for example, Sarah Blakely, she's a self-made billionaire. Her unique insight was that women wanted to wear tights, but without the feet. So she invented Spanx, and she became a self-made billionaire from it. You have other even kind of tech startup founders that have been women, and they've struggled against a lot of obstacles. But one of the positives is they're going to get a lot of PR if they do get some success. Or maybe there's going to be some VCs who are like, I want to show that I'm being more diverse. So maybe they're more likely, to give them money. Like, who knows? So you have to think that everything has a double-edged sword component to it, and it applies in every case, pretty much.
Even if you have let's say if we take this as some kind of game, so life is some kind of game, if you want to call it like that, or a journey, however, if you see it from a religious perspective or however, if you level all up in the mile system, you have the most money, you're super intelligent, you have everything is on top, but you're not happy. Do you think, for instance, money is a key performance indicator for happiness or success? Because that's what our system suggests, right? If you have a lot of money, then you're successful and probably happy. But is it the case?
There's been some good studies on this, actually. Does money buy happiness? There's been some good studies. There's a really good book. I think it's called The Happiness Manifesto, I think, by Jonathan Haidt. Something About Happiness by Jonathan Haidt. Very good book. Basically, money can buy you happiness to a certain level. So I think it's to a much lower threshold than anybody would imagine. It's just a little bit above average income money can make you happier. But after that point, it doesn't. So it's just like a little bit. And also it's a small factor. If you're very poor, then it can bring up your happiness a lot. But if you're like kind of, let's say, average income, average wealth, getting more wealthy isn't going to make you much more happy. And it's because the way our brains work and the set points. So it's not a good key performance or indicator of happiness at all, because it's so limited in how much it can increase happiness. In our brains, we think it's going to increase our happiness a lot, and it's not. So we talk about different types of success in the book. We talk about you have to define success for yourself. So the first step actually isn't to identify your unfair advantages. The first step is to ask yourself, what is your motivation? What's your why? The start with why was popularized by Simon Sinek. And yeah, absolutely. To ask yourself, what's your motivation? If you think you're going to be happy just because you have nicer cars, nicer watches, whatever materialistic ways of being happy, then you're probably going to be mistaken. What you're going to enjoy is the journey, the growth journey of starting a company, of succeeding. The satisfaction of an achievement might give you some happiness, at least for a short time. But just in general in life, striving can make you happy for the journey. So we all have to define what our values are. That's why I tried to do my own startup. It was a marketing agency, right? And my goal for that wasn't to make a huge, big, successful unicorn IPO company. No, it was just to give myself more time. So my value, especially when I was younger, was about time. And it still is right now, actually, is how can I have the freedom to spend my time how I want? So you have to know what your values are, because you can be chasing what society is telling you will make you happy, but it's not. So you have to learn to know thyself. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of introspection to know what makes you happy. And it's usually not going to be material things. It's usually not going to be money. But there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. There's nothing wrong with striving for those things. I think what makes for a good motivation is to have a balance between outer success, like kind of selfish success. It's like, what lifestyle do I want to live? What kind of car do I want to drive? What holidays can I have? Versus what impacts can I have on the world, which is going to give you more happiness and satisfaction overall.
Yeah.
But reality is, if you just think only about what impact can I have on the world, usually that's not going to be enough to motivate you. For most people, we have a selfish side and an unselfish side. So we need to have both. I think it's good to have both. I want to have a nice car. I want to get a nice Tesla to drive. I want to do this. But at the same time, I want to have a good impact. I want to look at what my company is doing. Is it having a good impact? Or am I doing a gambling app? Or am I doing something that's going to be addictive and not helpful to people?
It's so funny that you say that. It's so funny because that's so good, because how I call it is like egoistic altruism. Like you're somehow egoistic, but like I'm doing my channel to help people out there who just getting started in engineering. But also I want, in the long term, I want to make money with this. So I build my status. Yeah. So
this is how to manage and motivate yourself. And it's also how to manage and motivate teams and people. Because if you tell them, join my company because we're saving the planet, some people will be motivated enough to join that. There are some people who are very altruistic and they don't really care about their lifestyle and stuff. But not the majority. The majority, you're not going to get the top talent by saying that, because you're just going to have a very small pool of people who are outliers, that they're so... This is the thing, we're diverse as human beings. I don't like one-size-fits-all advice. There are many different types of people. We have different personalities, different drives and motivations. The specifics are different. Overall, we have similar drives and motivations. But, you have outliers and you have exceptions. And in a big world with a big population, there are many of those outliers and exceptions. So that's why we wanted to write a book that was taking into consideration your own personal circumstances, your own personal personality. That's why it's not prescriptive. It's not telling you should do this. So we used to get questions like, should I do an MBA? Should I drop out of college? Should I do this? And it's like, the answer is, it depends. It depends on your goals. It depends on your personality. It depends on what your unfair advantages are. Those are the three things that I think can really help to drive your decisions, by looking at those three areas. What's my motivation and my values? What's my personality? What do I enjoy doing, kind of thing? What would I be good at? What would be like hard work but fun? Like Warren Buffett says, he tap dances to work every day. On the chapter of early on in the book, we talk about luck and how that plays a role. And we talk about how, hard work is something that is kind of like part of meritocracy. Like if you work hard and you achieve success, you kind of deserve it. This is what we all kind of agree. And I agree with it too. But there's also, if you go deeper than that, some people are more wired for hard work than others. And some people can find what they're passionate about, that they enjoy doing and working hard on, doesn't even feel like work.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett says he tap dances to work every day because he was wired for capital accumulation. He likes to spend his time. So Bill Gates fills his calendar up full of things. Every 5 minutes is accounted for. Every 2 minutes is accounted for. Warren Buffett's calendar is empty because he just likes to read books. He doesn't like to do meetings. He likes to read books and just think deeply. And he says, if I just make one big decision a year, that's good. That's what him and Charlie Munger say. So that's his personality, right? I remember reading his biography when I was like 18 years old, and I was like, what the hell is this guy? I can't even relate to him because he was doing stock market investing when he was like a kid.
Yeah.
And that's weird to me, you know? So going back to the idea of, I think we have to find what we enjoy doing, and it takes time to do that. I didn't know that I'm going to enjoy being a speaker, a teacher, a writer. I never did any of that stuff before. You know, Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours. I don't have hardly any hours writing, but then I did well with this book. I got W.H. Smith Book of the Month, Business Book of the Month. We got an Amazon bestseller. We got some press in the BBC and all this other press. And it's like, wow, that's awesome, you know? So I've discovered it. And it took me until I was 30 years old to realize, oh, this is what I enjoy doing and I'm good at. So it takes time. You have to try a lot of things. So the more things you try, the more you can find what you enjoy and what you're good at. But also don't look for magic. You're not going to find something that's going to be, oh, this is magical. I just love every second of it. No, there is going to be parts of it which you hate. There's going to be parts of it which are frustrating when you're learning to do it. So you have to push through that. You do have to work hard in that sense.
It's so fascinating that you said that, because you have done so much, and at some point that the parameters were in such a constellation that that everything fitted, and you didn't have to write 10,000 hours to become an expert. You just did it. And fortunately you met Ash and so on. That's also what I thought just about, is when people say, what would happen if Mike Tyson fought Muhammad Ali?
Yeah.
It didn't happen because at that time, so to speak, the universe was in equilibrium. Ali was the best, and then there was another phase of another best. So Mike.
Exactly. It's like timing. It's like a lot of people who are the greatest, it's like if you put them in another time, nobody specific comes to mind right now, but just generally speaking, they probably wouldn't be the greatest. It was just like those were the competitors at that time. Yeah. It's like the Olympic world records keep getting broken. And it's not because, you know, somebody from 100 years ago who did the Olympics then did it now, they'd be rubbish. But it's just, you know, you do what you can for the time that you're in. The landscape is always changing. You know, the technology trends are always changing. Yeah. The societal trends are changing. And things are changing faster and faster. That's why it's always important to learn to upskill. You know, one thing I didn't mention about the Miles framework, there's two things I didn't mention. Number one, which is in status, which is very important, is your network, is who you know. It's huge. You know, it's like, there's a phrase, which is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And there's a lot of truth to it. You know, it's not an absolute truth, but it can really help, because your social circle can help you level up yourself, motivate yourself, help you notice the right opportunities. You know, if you grow up in a different kind of neighborhood, the only opportunities you see is maybe drug dealing, maybe getting into some crime, you know, that kind of thing. That's the only opportunities that you see. Is that because you're a bad person? Maybe partly. There's some wrong decisions there which are immoral, but maybe it's a lot to do with your environment and who you hang out with and the kind of trauma you've gone through. So your network and who you know is so big. Like if you want to raise money for a startup, if you want to get a business partner, if you want to, whatever it might be, it's so huge. That's one thing I didn't mention. The second thing I didn't mention is the Miles framework is on the foundation of mindset. And having a strong work ethic is obviously part of your mindset. But in the book, we identify a few key mindsets to have. And let me see if I can remember them from the top of my head right now. Number one is you have to have the mindset. So first of all, we talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. You have to have a growth mindset or a growth reality mindset where you can realize the limits of your strengths or of your circumstances. That's as a foundation. You can't have a fixed mindset and think you're going to improve. Well, that's, if you're reading a book, if you're listening to the podcast, I'm sure you've got a growth mindset. But secondly, you also need to have that kind of grit and resilience. You know, you need to be able to persevere. This is something that's a very important mindset factor to succeed. If you have failure and give up. You can have all the unfair advantages in the world. You're not going to succeed. That's really important. Secondly, being resourceful, trusting yourself that you can come up with a solution if you put yourself in a situation. In most cases, you can figure out how to do it. You can Google it. You can ask people. You can try and fail until you get there. Like, it's that belief in your own resourcefulness is very important. You need to have, so that's 2. Thirdly, you need to have constant and never-ending self-learning, like kind of lifelong learning is what we call it, actually. It's very, very important to keep leveling up your skill set, especially in the environment we now live in. I'm trying to think, what have I forgotten from, if I just open up the mindset one, I'll remember. We haven't done events for a while now because of the COVID stuff.
But now while you're searching for it, it's so fascinating that you mentioned the growth and the fixed mindset, because maybe Barbara Oakley. She has done a course on Coursera about learning how to learn, which is a quite essential skill.
I love that.
And there is a difference between the diffuse state and somehow the focus state of the mind. And you have to have both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the one I've forgotten. So first of all, what you were talking about just now is having a growth mindset. What else did you say? A growth mindset and a fixed mindset.
And the parallel was like in neuroscience or psychology, or neuroscience particular, there is this diffuse state and focus state. It's exactly the same.
It's the idea of like, you need to have the skill of narrowing down your choices when there are too many choices. When it's too diffuse, you need to focus onto a few.
It's actually,
make a decision.
It's actually, if you learn something, then you have this, this Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes learning, 5 minutes break. And then 25 minutes, you have this focused vision, this tunnel vision on learning new stuff. Doesn't matter if it's hard, you just keep doing it. And then if you have done the 25-minute time, you have 5 minutes of break. And in this 5 minutes, you can chill, you can drink something. And this is your diffuse mindset. And it's like taking a nap. Like I think Thomas Edison did it. He had a key in his hand, and then he was taking a nap. And when the key was falling down and made some noise, this was his diffuse state, and he got up with some new ideas.
That's usually why we get good ideas in the shower or when we go for a walk.
Right.
Yeah, I love this kind of concept. There's also another analogy, which is catabolism and anabolism.
Yeah, right.
So catabolic is like when you're working hard, you're lifting weights, for example. And anabolic is the growth phase is when you're resting. And that's when your body can actually build. If you work out constantly, you're just going to be overtrained. You're not going to get bigger. You're not going to get stronger. If you work out, take enough rest, work out, take enough rest, that's how it works. So it's interesting how that works. Yeah, absolutely. So I touched on a few mindset factors there. Grit and perseverance was one. Lifelong learning was the other. And what did I say else? I spoke about the growth mindset as well. It's an important one. So vision is also super, super important. If you can't have a strong vision of what you want the outcome to be, and resourcefulness is another one that I already mentioned. So those are the kind of 4 areas, in addition to having the reality growth mindset is what we call it in the book. So these are the things so the mindset is like the foundation for all the unfair advantages. Without mindset, it's just no point. No point in going ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to also touch on the thing you mentioned earlier on with happiness. And there's a psychological proven effect called the Hedonic Treadmill. Right? If you go to these big corporations and Google, you have these ping pong tables. It's basically just a psychological effect to keep you in the office, right? But at some point, the same as if you have enough money and you have this fancy car, you have this big house, at some point you're just saturated and you're like, okay, it's not making me happy anymore. So what would your advice be for someone getting started, trying to escape 9 to 5 and not hitting a wall? What would you say?
Yeah, it's, thinking about that kind of hedonic treadmill and thinking about kind of being saturated in sort of hedonism or pleasure and realizing that's not going to give me more happiness because I'm already saturated in that. It's a really important philosophical mindset to have. But I'm going to say something here, which is that actually it's not necessary. It's useful, but it's not necessary when you're trying to build up from zero, or not zero, but like you're trying to escape your unhappy situation at the moment. It's useful to set expectations because to know that when you get to whatever you're aiming for, life is still life. You know, like you're still going to have problems. You're never going to get rid of all your problems, right? No matter how much money you get, no matter anything else. So that's something good to bear in mind. But it's not something that's essential to know just to escape. Actually, sometimes being delusional and thinking that you're going to be happy if you hit the next milestone, it can sometimes help you in an unhealthy way, but it can help you. It's going to be unhealthy because when you get there, you're going to be even more unhappy. So it's good to know that ultimately you've got to enjoy the moment. You've got to enjoy the journey in life. It's good to know that. But I remember myself when I was frustrated and I couldn't, and I was working a job in the city because I did that briefly after university. It was no use telling me this. Do you know what I mean? It was like, yeah, it's like, this is for somebody not at my level. It's for somebody who's had a little bit of success. And now you can talk to them about this concept. It's like they're at the wrong level to listen to it. Sometimes you can. I mean, I understood it intellectually, but I didn't understand it emotionally. So there's a deeper understanding that you get when you go through it versus just understanding it intellectually. But it's still useful to have it intellectually, right? So it's still useful to know that ultimately life is about the richness of the life that you live, how much value you can add to other people. You know that satisfaction is going to come from that. Happiness is going to come from that. And it's good to know that happiness, there's a difference between peace and contentedness. You know, that kind of happiness, where it's not like a giggling, riding a roller coaster happiness. It's like it's just like, I'm happy. You know, I'm content. You know, that Eastern philosophy type of happiness, versus, you know, going to a theme park or going partying or whatever, which is hedonistic kind of happiness, which is, you know, pleasure. And the difference between pleasure and happiness is very important. But I think a lot of people are very unhappy because of their situation. It's like they're below baseline. It's like they hate with a passion their jobs, their bosses, the lives they're living. Unfortunately, sometimes they hate their partners that they're living with, but they're too scared to leave them or try to fix the situation because, you know, this is going into relationships now. But it's like, if you're completely blaming the other person rather than thinking of how you can work at it together, is also important. Sometimes you've worked at it enough. It depends on the situation that you just need to be brave enough to think, okay, this isn't working. There's a lot of situations there, right? But I think a lot of the time when you're below the baseline, you're very unhappy. There's no use talking about this happiness stuff. You just want to get out of your situation. One of the biggest bits of advice I would give is like, you should probably watch Fight Club, the movie Fight Club. That influenced me when I was younger. And it's like just thinking like, you know, just keeping up with the Joneses, and trying, and I think that's one of the cool things about COVID right now is people are realizing it's like, you know, spending more time with family and just at home and just taking it easy and thinking more and spending more time maybe reading and going for walks, which we can do in the UK. Luckily enough, still we can go outside and go for exercise. Life is also about that, not just competing to have the highest net worth or to have the coolest car or the biggest house, you know? Yeah, that's the kind of philosophical, spiritual stuff.
It's good that you mentioned it because Bill Gates is also doing this with his, what it's called, Think Week, I think, where he just takes 1 week and just reads books and just lets his mind flow and thinks about new stuff. That's also like training the idea muscle, so to speak. I want to touch on another point. You research some people, in particular Elon Musk now. Do you think it's necessary to go through hard times to do something great?
Oh, that's a great question. So let me just give some background. So the reason I'm researching Elon Musk right now, I've actually finished researching him for the most part, and I'm just about to release part 1. So when this gets released, I'm sure my part 1 of my podcast and my article series is going to come out. Maybe even part 2 will be out by then. There's going to be a 3-part series on Elon Musk, and it's called Success Decoded. We're going to do different people, but I'm starting with Elon Musk. And I go through their biography and I go through their success and I try to figure out what was their unfair advantages, what were their unfair advantages, and also what can we learn from them. So it's like the unfair advantages side is kind of the luck side, although you can develop some of them through hard work as well. But the other side is the hard work and the right mindsets. What mindsets can we learn? What kind of thinking can we learn from them? So there's a lot we can learn, and there's also a lot we can say, oh my God, okay, I can't reach that level of success because this person is an outlier. The whole point of the series is to study the exceptional people, the outliers. So they're going to be like off the charts, right? So we can't compare ourselves to them, but we can learn from them. Elon Musk went through a lot of adversity. He was bullied as a child.
Yeah.
His father was abusive. He did some really hard jobs. And you see this pattern in a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things. You can think of one of the unfair advantages is having a stable, loving childhood. It's an unfair advantage. However, having some adversity can be a double-edged sword because it can drive you, give you fire in your belly to succeed. And a lot of people who've succeeded highly have had a lot of adversity and unhappiness and tragedy in their lives. Elon Musk also had a child die in sudden infant death syndrome, which is really sad. He also had really bad malaria. Like, he almost died. Like, so he's gone through some shit. So there's a really cool book, and I've been in touch with this Harvard professor on Twitter. We've spoken a little bit. Her name is Laura Huang. She's written a book called The Adversity Edge or The Adversity Advantage, something like that, which is like what we speak about in our book. It can be a double-edged sword to have something which drives you, like being poor, growing up poor, can give you a fire in your belly. So I think adversity can give you extreme drive, but I don't think it's... Elon says this. He says this about his kids. He says in his biography, there's a quote which is, "My kids are growing up with everything they want. This is not how I grew up. But how can I manufacture adversity in them? I can't. It's difficult." So he's just... Bill Gates and many others like him are not giving much of an inheritance to their children relative to their wealth. It's still a lot. I think they're still going to be multimillionaires just from inheritance. But that's nothing compared to the multi-billions that they have. They're giving most of that away. And the reason is they don't want to make life too easy to be a disservice to their own children. So I think this is an important mindset. And a lot of, especially in the past, I think nowadays people are more aware of this. But in the past, people really used to spoil their kids. And there are a lot of people that are still like that. If they were self-made, they grew up poor, but they became wealthy, they usually really spoil their children because they just think, oh, I had a terrible childhood, I want them to have a happy one. But nowadays people are realizing that this is short-sighted because if they get everything they want, and Ash struggles this, he's got a 12-year-old daughter now, and he always thinks, oh my God, she just grew up with the most nicest hotels, the nicest restaurants. It's difficult because that's their baseline. So it doesn't make them happy because they grew up with it. So it's their baseline. So if they go below that, they're unhappy. Whereas if their baseline is just normal, it's average, anything above that is going to make them happier, right? So I think I've heard of somebody like, this goes back to the catabolic, anabolic kind of thing of like, a lot of people in Silicon Valley now are really into fasting. And it's because that deprivation can kind of reset and can make you happier in other ways. Your body can start repairing itself. When you do fasting. You start to appreciate food more because you're restricted it, then you're eating it, then you're going to really enjoy it more. Yeah. So it's like some people do, I can't remember who, maybe it was Jack, the Twitter guy, Jack Dorsey. I think he does this as well, where they go on like these yoga retreats or meditation retreats and or like dopamine fasts. I've never done that myself, by the way. Maybe I should. Of like, you stay away from your phone, so no notifications on the phone, no super like tasty, amazing food, no sex, like try to just to reset your body to a baseline where you can be happier again and just appreciate life more again. That's why there's two types of holidays you can go on. And again, this is something that I need to do more myself. One type of holiday is like an adventure holiday. I'm going to go climb this mountain, or I'm going to go like backpacking with a very low budget, or I'm going to sleep in a tent and go camping with very few luxuries. When you do that, especially doing that with other people, you get a crazy satisfaction out of it. And it's really enjoyable because you go through adversity together and then you come out and then you're really happy at the other end. Versus the type of holiday where you're just at a luxury resort and you're just lying on the beach. There's a place in life for both of those, by the way. I'm not against the luxury resort. I do that myself. And I don't do enough of the adversity things. But the one I do, or when you go on a long hike, you can really enjoy it because you get really tired and then you sleep really well at night. So I think that kind of touches on this whole adversity thing. I think life, this is the theme of our chat right now, right? It's this idea of like, life isn't just about maxing on the dopamine or on the rewards or on the like pleasures. It's about like that balance and the up and down, and that's the richness of life.
That's a good one. What do you do to keep yourself informed in this fast changing world?
So it can be a real this is where dopamine and addiction can come into it, because for example, at the beginning of March, when now in 2020, it was when all the COVID stuff was happening, and it was like, how bad is this going to be? And how, so I was addicted to the news at that time, because it was like, okay, what's happening? What's the response? Okay, I don't think the government is doing enough. This is exponential. People don't realize how serious this is. And I was on Twitter a lot, because it was like listening to some really interesting people like Nassim Taleb on Twitter, who talks about like black swans. He talks about being anti-fragile. He talks about exponential things like COVID-19. Actually, he says that like a pandemic is not a black swan. Black swan is something unexpected, out of the blue, a catastrophic, unexpected thing. He says it's not a black swan because we knew for years that a pandemic is going to come at one point or another. So we didn't prepare, and that's our own failure. Mark Andreessen wrote a really good article. Did you see the article about we need more builders? We need to build, I think it's called. If you haven't checked it out, I'll send you the link. You're going to love it. It's all about how over the last 60 years, technologically speaking, maybe not technology in general, but like there's a lot of aspects of modern living which have not improved. Our cities have really hardly improved in the last 60 years. There's been no innovation, no progress. Healthcare, especially in the United States, hasn't improved. Homeless people, housing hasn't improved. And this is a real failure of society. It's not a failure due to lack of resources, lack of money. Absolutely not. It's not due to a lack of talent. Again, absolutely not. It's due to a lack of will, a lack of imagination. The way our societies are set up right now is very, I'm going off on a tangent from your question, but it's very much based on like the financial sector, which a lot of the time is not value adding. It's just like rent seeking and playing games, like arbitrage and stuff like that. And also this management consultancy industry, which are taking all the best graduates, the most talented people, and giving them jobs which are not creating any innovation, are not doing anything new. And also the third thing is oligopolies that we live in now. We now live in a duopoly of especially online, of Google and Facebook. You know, especially online advertising is a pure duopoly of Google and Facebook. Retail is slowly becoming a monopoly of Amazon, which is crazy. It's just like, so innovation is slowing down. So it's a really cool article. But yeah, so going back to how I stay updated is I need to develop a better system, but it's about trying to limit. So right now I have limited going on Twitter, checking the news, because it's like, okay, we're all in lockdown now. It's all cool. So now I'm in a content creation phase. I use the Pomodoro technique to keep myself. I actually love that. I keep myself aligned with that and with bullet journaling, which is a great method, which I really love. How do I keep updated? It's through these things, through reading quality content. If Paul Graham releases something, I'm going to read it. Like that's the typical tech sector thing, is reading essays by Paul Graham. Like listen to people who are smart. Some of my friends were very like, they're like, how did you know all this stuff? You know, because I was criticizing the government response. I was like, no, because I'm listening to the right experts. It's not because I'm so smart myself. It's because I'm smart enough to identify who the right people to listen to are. So I think it's trying to get quality journalism, quality publications, knowing which writers to read and listen to. I think that's the key. I haven't set up a full system yet. I'm just like, oh, I'm subscribed to this person's newsletter. Some cool stuff I find there. I'm going to subscribe to this newsletter. There's some cool stuff there. I put my Twitter is like active on these specific people. That's how I do it. I try not to let the dopamine cycle of these addictive apps, like Twitter or like the media consumption, get the better of me. That's what I try to do.
Got it. So two things I want to mention. First of all, that article you mentioned, we need builders. That's a good point that you mentioned, because we are so focused on what's coming tomorrow, what's coming in the future, but we still have poverty. We still have people living on the streets. So that's kind of a sad thing. And also that you mentioned, I don't do it maybe like you, but I like inform myself on Twitter and listening to the smart people, because when you sometimes listen to Elon Musk and you have him as a guru, sometimes he's also not saying things that are like logical or most of the time he does, but when he was talking about COVID, that it's just unnecessary.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, but then it's like listening to both sides and then deciding for yourself, because you live in your own world, you have your own glasses on, just to say, okay, is it now a conspiracy theory, or what do I personally think from my point of view? So just to engineer your mind, so to speak.
Exactly. And I think somebody, I can't remember where I heard this, it was a good metaphor, which is have a personal board of directors for your own mind. So it's like, that's the cool thing. We live nowadays, we can find some really smart thinkers and we can listen to them, and we can kind of analyze and evaluate ourselves whether what they're saying is true, whether it's right, whether it's rooted in logic and reality. And that's what I try and do.
Cool. Last thing I wanted to ask you is how can someone who is in a 9-to-5 can overcome the so-called resistance of starting something by himself? Because how can I say it best? So the resistance grows proportionally to the decisions we make. So the harder the decision actually is, the harder the resistance, or the more life-changing it is. What advice would you give at the end, so for people who are trying to do something by themselves or hustling?
So fighting resistance is one of the biggest battles in life, and this is based, and I'm assuming you're doing the same thing, based on The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Have you heard of that book?
I think
and the resistance.
Yeah.
So he has this concept called the resistance, which is this idea that it's like it's a model for understanding procrastination, which is that you're going to procrastinate things which are going to be long-term useful and helpful to your long-term growth. It's like your real compass is going to be pointed, the compass of your life, destiny, or whatever it is, what you need to do in life is going to have the most resistance. And the things which are useless, time-wasting, silly, that's going to have the least resistance, right? So we're all generally going to have like very little resistance to playing video games, to just watching YouTube, to watching Netflix. But we're going to have a lot of resistance to things which are going to be more meaningful. What I also like about this, by the way, as a side note, so there's two resources, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and also the guy from Wait But Why. There's a blog called Wait But Why. And he has a very, very famous TED talk about procrastination. It's excellent. He talks about like the instant gratification monkey. And he uses the metaphor of a ship. Your brain, you are trying to drive the ship of your brain, but the instant gratification monkey keeps taking the wheel.
Yeah, I know that one.
Then,
that's good.
Yeah, and then the panic monster comes in, and that's when you actually work. My advice is try to include the panic monster as early as possible. Basically, it's really, really hard to just try to take resistance without having real deadlines. And the only way to bring the panic monster in to force you to do the work is to have real deadlines. And the only way to have real deadlines is to have other people which are holding you accountable to those deadlines. Because holding yourself accountable is very, very hard, and very few of us can do it. I'm not very good at doing it. So the way to hold yourself, I've heard some authors, some very, very successful business authors. I think not Ryan Holiday, but people like Ryan Holiday. They were saying that they could somebody was asking them, why don't you self-publish your book? Why do you make sure to get a publishing deal? And I got a publishing deal as well, right? So why do you get a publishing deal? Why don't you self-publish? Because they have a huge platform, so they will sell a lot of books even if they self-publish. They don't need it to be in all. One of the main benefits of getting a publishing deal is that you're in all the shops, and you're in all the airport bookshops, and you're global, and they're going to design it really nice and take care of all the details for you. Well, if you have money and you have a big platform, you do not need publishers, because you can just hire editors, you can hire book designers and front cover designers. You can do all of that yourself. And but the reason he gets it is because they're going to hold him now accountable to doing it. That's the only reason he does it. Now they're going to give him deadlines and they're going to keep telling him, hey, we paid you in advance. You need to do this. So now he's accountable. So basically, the thing to know is that you are not unique. I thought I was so bad with procrastination. I've always struggled with procrastination. I thought I was uniquely bad. I'm not uniquely bad. There are a lot of people a lot worse who have a lot of success in their life.
Mm-hmm.
The way they manage it is through having some kind of accountability mechanisms. The way I was able to finally start my business, in the beginning I procrastinated so much. The way I was able to finally do it is to get an accountability partner. Find somebody, have some online forums, maybe some Facebook groups. I don't know, in any way that you can. I would love to have an accountability partner right now, by the way, for creating content. I'm in a new phase of my life to do content. I want to eventually do YouTube like yourself, Yusuf. I want to do podcasts. And I don't have right now somebody holding me strongly accountable to releasing and publishing, because I'm a perfectionist and I'm going to spend too long on it and I'm still not going to be happy with it and I'm not going to release. So the way to do it is to have an accountability partner, have externally imposed deadlines. One of my business mentors, he describes it as throwing your hat over the fence. Imagine if you're wearing a hat and you're near a high fence. If you throw your hat over the fence, you're going to be forced to climb that fence to get your hat back. You're just forced. So in any way that you can throw your hat over the fence, in other words, commit to something, and which you're going to be forced to do. For example, if you're scared of public speaking, book yourself in to speak somewhere just for free.
That's good.
If you're booked, you have to commit. And now you're going to be super scared to do it. Yes, it's scary, but if you do it, you're going to be forced and then you're going to do it. Or if you say publicly, I'm going to have a new podcast out every week or a new YouTube video out every week. Publicly, you write it everywhere. You're going to feel so ashamed of not doing it. You're going to be forced to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So my goal for the podcast is I'm going to say, because I'm too scared to say once a week because I do longer form and I do a lot of research. So I'm going to say once every 2 weeks, twice a month. I'm scared. Like right now, I feel that resistance in my body telling me, oh crap, I'm not going to manage. I'm going to really struggle. Oh my God. But I'm going to force myself. And Yusuf, if I don't do this, I want you to hold me accountable. Yeah. I want to do podcast release every 2 weeks, even if it's not going to be that great. Screw it. I need to do it. So that's the way to do it.
That's good advice. What makes you happy? Do you think, or what's the meaning of life for you? Better ask it that way. What do you think? What's the meaning of life? To be happy only?
I think that I do have a spiritual and religious background, which I do believe in. So I do believe that life is created for us as a kind of a test. I do believe in that aspect of life. Yeah. And I do believe that life is about being happy at the same time and content. And I think it's just about alignment. So if you align for the hereafter, if you believe in an afterlife, if you align, but it's just about morality. So whether you believe in it or not, you're going to be happier if you live a moral life. And you're going to be happier if you try to optimize for living to your values. If you go against your own integrity, how are you going to live with yourself? I'm not going to be able to live with myself. So I think for me, life is, we have been created by God, I believe. I believe that life is a test. And I do believe that in happiness in this life as well, of course. And I don't believe in, there's a lot of dogmas. In other words, there's a lot of specifics when it comes to organized religion, which I don't fully believe in. Like there are a lot of things which everybody wastes so much time arguing over little specifics, in religion, whether it's between religions or within religions and different sects and different details. I don't believe in that kind of stuff too much. I think if you just live a good life and you're moral, I think God is just, and we do live in a just universe in that sense. So for me, life is about happiness in this life and living to your values. And I believe that will develop a good afterlife. And I do think that worship can give us, so I do believe in worship. I do my prayers as well. But for me, it's like a meditation. So it's the same as what people say, it makes me happy to meditate. But I need to work on it, because if I talk about this, it's as if like I'm a guru and I'm teaching you. No, I need to work on it. I need to focus on my meditative aspect rather than just going through the motions of my prayer, for example. So prayer, Islamic prayer, isn't just about asking what you want. It's like a meditation. It's emotions and repetitions and mantras that you repeat. So that's the meaning of life for me.
I'm on the same level with you. So with Ramadan coming up soon, we're going to be so productive, I assume, Hasan. And
I hope so.
And I'll be your...
I'm trying to prepare myself for it. So I'm drinking a little bit of water now, but that's the first water I've drank today. I'm not fasting today, but I'm kind of semi-fasting. I'm trying to get my body used to it.
I'm doing the same way, same thing, by the way. Yeah. It's kind of funny. So consider myself being your accountability partner from now on. And is there anything you would like to say? Of course, we can get your book in any bookstore. Yeah. Almost any bookstore. Amazon, of course.
And it's available right now on hardback, on Kindle, and on Audible. So Ash and I's voice are on it, but we also have the main narrator is like a BAFTA award-winning voice actor, or I think he's been on a show which won a BAFTA or something, but he's like a really good actor. He has a really nice voice. And Ash and I narrate our own stories, so it gives it a bit of character. So if you like listening, because I love listening, you can get it from Audible. If you love reading, you can get the hardback or you can get the Kindle. And get in touch with me and let me know what you think. If you have any questions, reach out on LinkedIn, especially where I'm getting more active is on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well, Twitter. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm releasing, you'll be able to find Success Decoded. So if you follow me on social media, I'm going to start talking about Success Decoded and this Elon Musk's first episode. So I'm going to talk about it there a lot and start to do a newsletter, which you can sign up for, which is purely about giving value. I just want to do value giving, because I really believe in that karma in that way. If you just give, then things will come back to you. So I'm in that stage where I'm just doing stuff for free. My podcast is not going to have ads on it because I can sometimes find ads annoying. I just want to make it value. But it depends. Sometimes it can be helpful. Sometimes that's the right way to monetize. But for me right now, I just want to give value because I'm privileged enough in my life to not need to monetize straight away. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do more like teaching stuff and hopefully do a YouTube. So that's my goal right now.
You will do so. I'm your accountability partner. Don't forget it.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
It's so cool to be in touch with you and Ash in some sense via Twitter. And who knows? By scheduling this podcast, I think one might be helpful for another one in the future. Who knows? So. Maybe I can do something for you, like you did for Ash. And we'll see, inshallah, what happens.
I would love to see that. Thanks a lot, Yusuf. It would be my pleasure. And it would be awesome. When I get started, so right now I'm doing the podcast, but when I get started on YouTube and stuff like that, I'm going to need your advice even more. But I've already learned so much about audio editing, and it's fun being a beginner, learning a process from you, like sound quality, audio editing, etc. So
it's an iterative process, but you will definitely become better over time. So, like Ali Abdal says, do the first 100 crappy videos, and then you'll get better. So, thanks a lot, Hasan, for being on my show. It was an absolute pleasure, and see you on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Awesome, talk to you then.
Bye-bye.
Take care, man. See you.